Coming up on Tech News Today, is Apple responsible for Chinese working conditions? We debate it with Molly Wood. Also, why is Twitter censoring posts? And does the Wii U need NFC or a new name more? All that and much more coming up.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Friday, January 27th, 2012. Tech News Today is brought to you by Ford, featuring voice-activated Sync AppLink. Now you can control select smartphone apps with your voice, so you keep your hands on the wheel and your eyes on the road. Check it out in the 2012 Ford Fiesta and at Ford.com/technology. Welcome to Tech News Today. I'm Tom Merritt.
I'm Sarah Lane.
I'm Iyaz Akhtar.
And I'm Jason Howell.
And this is the show we kick around the tech news of the day, try to make some sense of it all. Got some great guests joining us today from The Verge. Nilay Patel had to bow out at the last minute, but he was nice enough to get Sean Hollister to join us. Welcome, Sean.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Full disclosure, Sean is engaged to be married to my sister-in-law.
Is that how we got
Sean.
If I show any preferential treatment to
If
him
anything,
during the
he's
show,
gonna be-
I just want to make
he's
that.
gonna
Deeply
critique more.
conflicted episode of
Yeah.
Tech News Today.
Also, very excited to join my former co-host from Buzz Out Loud and CNET.com, Molly Wood. Woo.
Hello. Thanks for having me, and thanks for warning me that Sean's going to get all the preferential treatment now. Now you tell me.
Well, at least I disclosed at some point. All right, let's start off with one of the main reason that we asked Molly to be on the show today. The big story that the New York Times put out yesterday morning about Apple's supply chain, working conditions in China, how things go at Foxconn. This is a story that's been told before, but not probably in the depth that the New York Times told it. Probably the quote that's getting the most play, a former Apple exec, unnamed, said, "We've known about labor abuses in some factories for 4 years, and they're still going on. Why? Because the system works for us. Suppliers would change everything tomorrow if Apple told them they didn't have another choice. If half the iPhones were malfunctioning, do you think Apple would let it go on for 4 years?" Today, Tim Cook sent an email to his staff that 9to5Mac published on the web, reacting to this rather angrily, at least for Tim Cook, very angrily. Among the things in the email, "We care about every worker in our worldwide supply chain. Any accident is deeply troubling, and any issue with working conditions is cause for concern. Any suggestion that we don't care is patently false and offensive to us. As you know better than anyone," he's talking to Apple employees, "accusations like these are contrary to our values. It's not who we are." So the debate begins. Larry Dignan at ZDNet had a column up today pointing out, hey, you know what? Apple's not the only company that uses Foxconn or cheap Chinese labor. HP has 30% or so of the manufacturing that comes out of Foxconn. Not as big as Apple, but it's big. And all kinds of products that we use in America are made by cheap Chinese labor. So don't single out Apple. Molly, you wrote a column saying, okay, fair enough, but Apple has a lot of weight to throw around here.
Yeah, I actually said do single out Apple. And, the Times sources pointed to Apple specifically and some of their business practices specifically as aggravating a problem that certainly exists for everyone. Everybody does do business with China, and a lot of consumer electronics companies use a lot of those same suppliers. The fact is Apple is the biggest one, and Apple is consistently cited as the company that puts the most pressure on those suppliers in terms of margins, in terms of increasing efficiency. You know, they are the company that introduces a new product almost every year at exactly the same price as the year before. You don't get there without insisting on constantly good margins and efficiency, to an extent that, at least according to the sources who talked to the Times, safety is sometimes compromised.
How much responsibility is on any company to force changes? I mean, yeah, you can withdraw your support, but at a cost. And Apple's very cost conscious. Tim Cook is the guy that sets up these relationships. I think this is why it bothers him so much. Sean, what's your take on this?
Well, I have to believe that the New York Times has all these executives on the record saying that this problem, while this problem may be endemic, Apple is definitely making a lot of profit off of the backs of these Chinese laborers. And whether every company does that or not, that doesn't necessarily mean it's right. That doesn't necessarily mean that Apple couldn't put the pressure on if it wanted to, if it thought that it would make sense to do that for its public image or for the workers themselves. It could make a difference if it wanted to. And the New York Times, the executives quoted by the New York Times say that it's just not doing that. Whatever Apple is doing, it's great, but maybe it's not enough. Maybe it is part of the problem here and could be part of the solution instead.
Now, even though Apple is the biggest, they aren't the only one who could have an effect. Should we shine the spotlight as harshly on other companies like HP and say you too could change things if you led the way?
I don't think you can do that after you see something like Apple's latest quarter numbers. I mean, Apple is so crazy ahead as far as cash flow right now that they do seem like, in this sense, they'd have to be the industry leaders because they have the money to put people into these factories full time and make sure that they're watching. I mean, if that's what it takes. It's a job nobody wants, obviously, but that is something that they could do instead of just saying, well, I don't know. We don't know what's going on over there. We certainly don't advocate this, but we thought everything was fine. They could make sure that they know everything's fine.
Yeah, look, sometimes you just have to put the burden on the most powerful guy in the room to fix the problem. And Apple has, I think, in a lot of ways, through its business practices and its marketing practices, contributed more than any other company in terms of creating the cycle of upgrades, the sort of yearly consumer demand, those super strict margins and efficiency. They've created a big part of this problem. I think that they're in a great position to be the company that steps up and leads the other ones. Like, yeah, it would be great if all the dominoes fall. And if HP and Dell and Lenovo get on board with a movement, but at some point, if you start with Apple, it's going to stop a lot faster. It would take a longer time, I think, to rally consumers and rally all those other all those other companies. Apple could do it pretty much today.
Presupposing that Apple couldn't change Foxconn and the way they work, it seems like there's not a lot of alternatives out there because there was a piece in the Times about Steve Jobs talking to the president about how to get the iPhone built in America. And the thing was, because of the way the culture is there, that you can just hire 3,000 people very quickly at Foxconn, and these people live at the dorms. And this kind of corporate culture there is not exactly matched, well, in the United States, it's not matched in a lot of different countries. It's hard to find an alternative if you couldn't, I guess, make them budge.
There were a lot of commenters on my Google Plus page actually suggesting Mexico. A lot of American car companies are building cars in Mexico now, and I think that would be an alternative for inexpensive labor that's nearby enough that we could go and check on them a little more often.
The problem is if we're tracking for inexpensive labor, though, then we're going towards the same direction where we're looking at these profit margins, how to make them as large as possible, and pushing on some part of this formula to raise the profit higher at the risk of something. And if the something is going to be worker expense, and that's what you get in China, you have the more dangerous labor that's cheaper. It's one way to do it. Maybe there's a way that Apple can sacrifice a little bit of this profit and not go for the cheapest solution and help the workers in that way if it was willing to pay more or fund specific programs, maybe ones beyond what it's already funding, to keep these workers safe. Maybe that would make a difference.
Now, we asked Larry if he could come on and talk about his column about this on ZDNet, and we were unable to get a hold of him.
Yeah, I heard from him at the last minute, but he was already on his way somewhere.
He's already busy. But he writes, to the person working in the Foxconn plant, he's providing for his family and future generations. To him, the pay is probably pretty good. Everything is relative. Maybe the second and third generations wind up running Foxconn. Ditto for the guy and the textile worker in Africa and every other person in an emerging market. And you look at the history of the industrialized world, all countries have gone through this. Is it just sort of an inevitable revolution, and not revolution as an uprising, but evolution may be a better word, that you have to go through where people work for cheaply for long hours before you start to realize, you start to pull back?
Well, but it's one thing to talk about a labor market in a country, a labor market developing in a country. Like we had all of those problems in the U.S., obviously, until we had unions come along. But we were making products for ourselves. I think it's sort of a different proposition when you're talking about U.S. companies outsourcing in order to find cheap labor. And in some cases, I mean, Steve Jobs said, when asked about outsourcing, that part of the problem was that there aren't enough trained engineers in the U.S. I mean, I think Apple could get behind some programs in terms of training engineers here so that they could locate more factories here. But the fact is, it's somehow more exploitative if you're talking about economies that only sprung up to make consumer electronics that are primarily sold here.
John, you were going to say something?
I said I love the idea that generations, successfully take over, and different populations of people around the world successfully take over this lower rung of the chain and then get to move up and become the consumers rather than just the producers. But at some point, it seems like it's going to be a sort of a pyramid scheme here. I mean, if we're on top and then the Chinese and who's going to be next when you run out of new peoples who are on the bottom rung of the ladder? Somebody has to get stuck there. Otherwise, we move on to robots. Perhaps we move on to robots.
I think we move on to robots.
That's the next
Can
rung
we,
of the ladder.
and then,
So let's do that. Let's all move on to robots.
They take over and kill us all.
Good.
Obviously.
Good solution. A little final.
Yeah, but we don't want to invoke Godwin's law. Before we move off of this topic, I do want to point out that Tim Cook, in his email, does try to line out. These are the things we have been doing. We are working very hard to affect the working conditions in China. And he may have a very good argument that it's much easier to say, go change your labor practices than to actually make them change. And just pulling out of China might not change anything there. And what they're doing with sort of a soft power may be the more effective way. There's arguments to be had on both sides. But what I really want to finish on is the end of this supply chain is us. We're the ones buying the stuff, and we buy it. And, you mentioned, Molly, that, the planned obsolescence, and Apple has new stuff every year. They're not even the worst offenders in that respect. We've been talking a lot lately about how HTC and Nokia are trying to reduce the number of models they have to be more Apple-like and put out fewer SKUs, fewer different kinds of models. What do we do on our end if we want to affect? Because the only reason that Apple is making all this money is because we buy their products.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that was part of Larry Dignan's argument as well, that it's really up to consumers to sort of stop wanting phones so much. I think that is a little specious, to be frank. I mean, we're sort of, it's not like we're not mindless drones at the mercy of marketing machines, but the fact is that we take what's put in front of us. And so it's a little bit of a chicken and egg argument. I do think, though, that there's a lot of traction to be had in awareness. Like if we can have our own little sort of tech industry red ribbon campaign, the more we can put the pressure on these companies. That's what affected change at Gap. That's what affected change at Nike. That's what affected change when Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle all those years ago. I mean, I think if we can raise awareness, we're not necessarily going to stop consumers from wanting to buy new cell phones, but we can convince them that they don't want to buy new cell phones that have, figurative blood all over them.
Yeah, I don't think there's a clean cell phone out there right now is the issue. Maybe there is, but
I think that's probably the main problem is, okay, well, if you don't buy iPhones, well, what phone do you buy where these aren't, human rights issues?
Right.
Well, if you don't have a choice, is it reasonable then that you'll stop using a cell phone? No, that's not going to happen.
And outside of tech, the problem exists as well in textiles and other industries as well.
We could go look, though. I think we should look it up. I think we should see where all these phones are made, because the fact is, like, maybe Nokia is making all their phones in Finland. And it's fine. Who knows?
Pretty sure they're not.
I doubt it.
But yeah, no, exactly. We should look.
But
at
you
it.
never know.
You're absolutely right.
That's part of our awareness campaign.
Huh? What was that?
It does really feel like an endemic issue where there may not be a good choice, a safe choice, where you would have to boycott everything to avoid the issue because so much is produced there. But I do feel like even if this is something where you'd have to single out each and every company involved in the process, you do have to start somewhere, and perhaps Apple is the place to start.
I think they have a chance to be a moral leader, and I actually think that Tim Cook is the kind of guy who could do it. It's not even about it doesn't have to be about economics for them. I think they have more than enough money. They they're in the best possible position to say, we want to change the industry.
Yeah, this
and
isn't
we're going to be the leaders.
Sorry, this isn't new Apple. I mean, this is Tim Cook, and I think one of the first things he did, he set up they were matching contributions to charities now, something that under Steve Jobs they didn't do that. The discounts to their employees for Apple products. I mean, things that seem to make Apple a little bit more aware of the rest of the world. So maybe under Cook, it could be different.
Nokia makes their phones in Germany, Finland, the United Arab Emirates, and Azerbaijan.
There we go. Maybe.
Depending on which model you get.
I don't know.
According to this website, which is unsubstantiated. All right, let's move off this controversial subject to censorship.
Oh, much lighter.
Twitter put out a post today announcing that they now have the capability of blocking a post in one country without blocking it globally. This allows it to operate in countries that block certain communications that are not blocked in the rest of the world. One of the examples they use is Germany. They have a prohibition in Germany, and I think in France, against pro-Nazi content. So, for instance, if you're writing about the American Nazi Party, that's against the law in France and Germany to favor it, where it's not against the law in the United States. Up until now, Twitter, if they were asked to pull down that post, would either have to pull it down globally or just not do business in that country. What they're trying to do is say, we'd like to open offices in these countries where we'll be more liable to be subject to their laws. And to do that, we need to be able to pull down a post without pulling it down for everyone. This has caused outrage because, of course, the reaction is, oh, Twitter is now able to censor your content. And they're going to go into China and play with the firewall. They did say in their post that there are some countries that differ so much from our ideas that we will not be able to exist there. They didn't name China, but it seems to be they're implying that those kinds of countries they won't go into. But that hasn't stopped Twitter blackout and Twitter censored becoming popular hashtags and a boycott being planned for Saturday.
Well, and I know that people are using the Arab Spring as a really good example of, okay, well, let's say the government of Egypt says, nope, none of these tweets are going up because that's the rule in our country. And that was what, at least at the beginning, helped people outside of Egypt actually know what was going on. So if those tweets are stopped, well, sure, maybe they're not, they're not stopping the global conversation, but they're almost cutting off what would be a conversation.
Yeah, but I think that's sort of forgetting that. I find myself in a really interesting position here because, frankly, I think that what Twitter is doing is they're trying to walk a pretty fine line. And to say that it would have shut down the Arab Spring kind of forgets that Egypt turned off the internet in that country during the beginning part of the uprising. And I think that's most likely to happen in a country that's going to censor free speech anyway. At least Twitter is saying, look, we're going to do what we can. There are going to be cases where tweets are censored. But what I really like about it is that they're saying that they will at least try to make it obvious that the tweet was censored. So assuming that the internet is still up in your country and that you have access to Twitter, you may see a stream that says, a bunch of sort of relatively innocuous things and then like this content was censored, which if anything seems to draw attention to your government censorship, furthering, further fanning the flames of your discontent. Maybe.
It seems like Twitter made it easy to work around, though, because it's the country is determined by IP address, so and there's a drop-down so you can change that. So even if you were in that country and it was being censored, wouldn't you just be able to change what you were doing so that you would be able to view these censored tweets?
You'd be able to see the censored tweets, but then Twitter has at least some legal liability to say, well,
yeah.
We tried, and sometimes those IP addresses are inaccurate, so we have to give people a workaround. I think maybe the whole problem here is that the blog post just wasn't written with enough clarity because what I interpret Twitter as doing here is saying, look, right now, if someone, say in an Arab Spring situation, wants to, instead of turning off the internet, be more nuanced, which I agree, Molly, is probably not that likely. They're probably just going to go for the whole blackout. But let's say they go to Twitter and say, okay, you have to take down all these posts. Right now, if Twitter complies with that, they have to take them down for everyone in the world. Mm-hmm. And so what they're saying is we've now added the capability where we could limit that damage and we could set up an office in Egypt and not have to worry about taking it down for the rest of the world. We can limit it, but it's being seen as an increase in censorship when in fact, in the way I look at it, it's a decrease in censorship because you're saying let's limit the censorship to only the country. Mm-hmm. But when you bring up censorship, everyone says censorship bad. we must have no censorship.
Well, Tom, I mean, that's exactly what Twitter is trying to say with this, that it is additional leniency, that normally it would have to censor this content, but now it can afford to not censor it for the rest of the world, so the conversation can continue in places where it wouldn't be an issue. But the problem is, when it comes to censorship, the people who don't like censorship want to be able to see that something has been censored no matter where the censorship happens. So right now, the rest of the world is carrying on their conversation, thinking that Egypt was also privy to this, thinking that their messages are reaching everybody who uses Twitter, where that's actually not the case. Things that are happening in Egypt may not be able to get out. Things that are happening abroad may not be able to get to Egypt or whichever country we want to talk about that's invoking the censorship. This is a way of hiding the censorship to some degree from the rest of the world. So
does it not indicate on a post? I thought I read that it indicated on a post that it had been blocked from a certain country, even if you were reading it.
It says that it will block it for people people inside the country. If you are reading a tweet that's been censored, you'll be able to see that it's been censored by your country. I hope that's also true outside, but it doesn't say that.
Yeah, well, they do say specifically if you are located in the country where the tweet or account has been withheld, then that's exactly what you'll view. I don't know if it would be worded that way if it was globally.
I doubt that it is. That seems hard to pull off technically also.
Yeah.
But again, I think Twitter is trying to walk a fine line here, and I think, you know, quelle surprise, the internet is not understanding all the nuances, and they're angry about the C word. But I'm not sure that I think Twitter's trying pretty hard here. I think they're doing the best they can. I don't have that much of a problem with this.
Yeah, and I think you really have to realize that the alternative to them doing this is blocking it everywhere, right? I mean, this is in Germany. They're going to be required to take down this post one way or another. If they can say, well, we're only going to take it down in Germany, I feel like that's better than taking it down worldwide. But that doesn't take away from what Sean's saying, which is, you know, there should be an indication that it has been taken down in Germany so that we can say, hey, you know what, what's wrong with that?
Yeah.
If, you know, maybe pro-Nazi tweets aren't the thing that's going to get people riled up, but in an Arab Spring sort of situation, it absolutely would. All right, before we take a break, and we have to let Molly go, Jon Rubinstein, former Palm head, is leaving Hewlett-Packard. He announced today that he is gone. He has no immediate plans. He had been assigned a product innovation role back in July, and that was sort of seen as one step out the door. HP spokeswoman Mylene Mangalinden told All Things D that Rubinstein had now fulfilled his commitment to HP. He says, I'm going to take a well-deserved break after 4.5 years of developing WebOS. He did some interviews with All Things D and The Verge, which kind of seemed like he's been gone for a while, even though he's still been on the payroll. He told All Things D from Mexico, HP had won the process of acquiring Palm, and that he has been planning to leave since before the touchpad shipped. He wanted to get the touchpad out the door and take off, and they asked him to kind of hang around in an advisory role. He doesn't seem in these interviews to be too upset.
Maybe his role in being an innovation was to do this kind of telecommuting thing from far away and not actually participate. I don't know. Maybe it's innovative. I don't know.
Yeah, I think what he wanted to get across was like, look, guys, there wasn't some catastrophic thing that happened within the company and I was pushed out, or I didn't like the way that the touchpad launch had been handled, so I left in a huff. I was going to do this even before anybody had it in their hands.
I was tired of this place a long time ago.
You can't fire me. I quit.
And I've been in Mexico for a year.
Well, that's the thing. He's like,
I think he gets the last laugh for that one. He was on the payroll all this time. He was a great name to have on the payroll, and now he's like, oh, severance? Okay.
Yeah, sure. Come fishing with me, Josh Topolsky. I don't drink margaritas before lunch, though.
I do wish him the best, but I don't want to pin blame on him. I mean, HP definitely didn't do all it could to help his efforts to make the touchpad and WebOS a success there. A lot of things stifled that, not least of which Leo Apotheker telling the world that it would begin to ship these products just weeks after they were announced when they actually came out in the summer.
Yeah, there was a very carefully worded no comment about wanting to talk about Leo in the Verge interview, which I thought was interesting as well. All right, we're going to take a quick break and come back with some news about Nintendo. We got some more tech news to talk about, but Molly Wood, we got to let you go. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. It's great to talk to you again, and let folks know where they can find your stuff online.
Yeah, totally. I've been back on the stick, blogging a lot more often at news.com/Molly-rants. If you just Google
Someday.
Molly Rants, it's probably easier to find. But look there. I'm still doing Buzz Out Loud and Buzz Report, but I'm really I'm having a good time with the writing lately.
Absolutely. We will.
Happy Liquid Friday. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, go
Thanks,
drink some
Molly.
brandy. Have a good weekend.
And also to you.
Thanks, Molly.
Talk to you later.
Take care.
All right, this episode of Tech News Today brought to you by Ford, featuring available voice-activated sync AppLink, enabling you to control select apps with your voice. You just talk to your car in the Ford, and you say, I would like you to play Pandora, and then it launches your Pandora app. You can create a channel. You can skip songs, thumbs up, thumbs down, have your Twitter feed read to you, listen to a podcast. You could say, play Buzz Out Loud, or play Buzz Out Loud, or Tech News Today, or anything else. All you got to do is get a Ford and use AppLink. In fact, they got an API platform that allows Ford to continue to work with developers in the app community to bring apps to life with voice in their vehicles. So there's new apps being added all the time. Check it out in the 2012 Ford Fiesta, and you can learn more about AppLink and all the Ford tech at ford.com/technology. We thank them for their support of Tech News Today. On to Nintendo. They got several announcements today, Iyaz.
Yeah, computerandvideogames.com. Well, this is not an official announcement, but they're saying that Nintendo is considering renaming the Wii U because of public confusion about the 3DS. Now, the tagline for the 3DS, when they were selling it on television, was, this is not DS, this is Nintendo 3DS. And they're afraid that the Wii U will confuse people into saying, oh, that's already out, it's the Wii. But Nintendo's official news is that they confirmed the Nintendo Network, which is the name for its online service for the 3DS that will extend to the Wii U when that launches. The Wii U will support user accounts, but there's no indication if they're going to drop those horrible friend codes, you know, those long digit codes that make it really hard to find your friends on Nintendo's services. They confirmed the Wii U will have NFC support. Now, the way this is going
so that I can take it to the coffee shop and pay for my...
Well, you can pay for other stuff. What's being said is that Nintendo is going to accept micropayments because Nintendo doesn't store your credit card information like Sony. So if you wanted to buy like an add-on to a game or something, you could do that simply by tapping the controller with maybe your NFC phone, and that information comes from Nintendo's president. And the controller will interact with things like cards and figurines, so you can have some little augmented reality stuff there.
That's pretty cool. And I actually like the fact that Nintendo doesn't store my credit card information so it can be hacked by people, but it is annoying to have to enter your whole darn credit card every time you want to purchase some Wii points. So the idea of being able to just tap a phone or a credit card or something is cool. I just don't know if NFC is going to catch on. Sean, I mean, you follow this story pretty closely.
Yeah. So near-field communication, the primary use they're talking about is putting it in cards and figurines and so on, so that you can play with little devices that you have chips in them that you'll stick up next to your Wii U controller, and maybe you'll have a figure and you'll put it on the top of the controller and have it morph right into the screen, and you'll be able to play with that virtual character and so on, like Skylanders and like some of the augmented reality things that Nintendo's been doing for a while. I don't know if you're familiar with these, but both through the 3DS and the new PS Vita come with these cards, and you point the camera of your system at them and they turn into three-dimensional objects that you can play with as well. This may be an extension of that. But like you say, payments are a very interesting option for NFC. The chips that they're going to be using in the Wii U, or whatever it's going to be called, are based on the same technology that we use in a lot of NFC cards today. For instance, San Francisco's Clipper card that lets you ride Caltrain, and the Muni there has the same chip in it that the Wii U will. So you could be able to have cheap little cards that you can distribute freely or for a small expense. Nintendo could sell these at, convenience stores and so on, so that instead of tying it to an account the way some of the other systems do, where you've got a credit card that you're letting your kids play with your credit card, basically, you could sell the point cards in stores and just have them tap to their controller. And I think we'll probably see that.
Is there a way I can use my Clipper card to pay for some Wii games?
Wouldn't that be the day?
I've got the old TransLink card, but this is what they look like. They just say Clipper now instead.
The other thing is NFC might not have been. It's not like a giant success here in the United States. It's taken off in a lot of other countries. I mean, people have been using their phones as wallets for a long time elsewhere. So the fact that maybe it's not super hot here in the United States doesn't mean that it wouldn't be a valuable feature elsewhere.
Well, it might just take some time too.
The Nintendo.
NFC.
Did we?
Why are you
The other
laughing
question
at
on
me?
top of that, though, is whether we'll be able to touch our phones. Some of the new phones are having NFC technology built into them. The Nexus S and Galaxy Nexus both have it for Google services. New Blackberries are adding it. You can get batteries for your phones that have NFC built in. Perhaps we can build some apps to let our phones connect to the controller as well.
All right, let's move on to an Amazon merchant who got caught being too awesome. Lots of 5-star ratings.
If you bought one of their Kindle cases, you might think that they were awesome. A company called VIP Deals, an Amazon merchant, was offering customers refunds in exchange for 5-star reviews. Okay, so what happened was, and this is the New York Times reporting, customers purchased a $10 Kindle leather case. Now, that was advertised as a $60 case, but on sale for $10, so it was already an amazing sale. Okay, well, when they got those cases in the mail, shipped cases also included an offer to refund that $10 that they paid in return for a customer writing a positive review of the company. And the company even had some helpful language in there. We love getting your 5-star reviews. We strive so hard to make you happy. And so
wink,
we
wink.
get those kinds of reviews. Well, it turns out a lot of people took them up on it because basically you get a free case in order in exchange for saying this is a really great company. A lot of people took them up on that. 310 out of 335 reviews rated the product 5 stars. The company itself received quite a few reviews, 4,945 reviews with a 4.9 rating out of 5. 4.9, if you look through some of the reviews of the company, there were actually some people who said, oh my gosh, this is a total scam. Even if it's a great deal and you end up getting a case for free, this is totally unethical. New York Times got wind of this, contacted Amazon and said, do you know that this is going on? Amazon said, oh man, well, this is against our policy. Obviously, we can't allow merchants to do this. Pulled down not only the case, but another product that VIP Deals was selling on Amazon. It was a stun gun of some kind. So you might think, well,
what business are they in? Cases and stun guns.
Right, yeah. This company doesn't have a website. They operate out of a P.O. box in L.A. So you might think, okay, well, this is just a really shady company, isolated incident. People should have known better type of a thing. Well, they're not really alone. Even back in 2009, Belkin, you might remember, was caught using Mechanical Turk, which is sort of a side business that Amazon uses for people to perform activities that computers
small
can't
things
perform.
for small amounts of money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
65 cents for each positive feedback of this crappy cable. It was known to be, not work very well. So a little bit of money in exchange for positive feedback, a blight on that Belkin sales rep who was using Mechanical Turk. And also, this is not just unethical, but it's illegal. The FTC says if there's a merchant-customer connection that may affect that customer's credibility in any case, it needs to be fully disclosed. And there was a case just last year, Legacy Learning Systems. They sell music instructional tapes, settled for $250,000 last year over claims that it hired affiliates to recommend videos on websites without disclosing that they were doing it for money.
So if this merchant actually said, please disclose that you'll get a discount back or you'll get some refunds back if you give us a review, if they actually did that at the end of every Amazon review that was there, this wouldn't be illegal. It would
That's correct.
Oh, it sounds like
So maybe they just need to add a
or
disclaimer.
against policy.
It would
as
still be
well. Well, I
against
guess
Amazon's
It would be against the policy, but it wouldn't be illegal.
Amazon is saying, listen, we just don't want people to do things like this,
Yeah, I mean,
so we can't work with them. But legally, they would be okay.
I mean, I rely on those reviews all the time. I mean, that's the funny thing. Like, you want to see what people are really saying about a product, and you look at the Amazon review because you can look at a lot of other sites and things, but sometimes they don't review like the tiniest thing, especially like a Kindle case. I mean, there's like hundreds of those. So, although it would be free, so I mean, maybe it was worth 5 stars.
Well, but the point is like the company has no incentive to do this forever.
Yeah,
it's only going to be free for a little while. Then they have 500 reviews of people saying this is literally the best case you'll ever get, and then they're charging $50 again. So it is potentially, it's unethical, potentially extremely unethical. And if you consider how many Kindle Fires Amazon is going to sell just in the next year. I mean, cases are important. They're a hot commodity right now. People want to buy the best case. And if you've got something that all of a sudden is way up at the top, it's been artificially elevated, but you're more likely to buy that.
I mean, you want to use the Amazon reviews when you're buying something, but you also want to look at the negative ones first. You want to see what people are saying against the product primarily, because
absolutely,
astroturfing, which is what this term is known as, isn't anything new. I mean, all the time there are company employees who are logging on to Amazon and pushing up their own products as amazing. You can often recognize when somebody is astroturfing for a product, because they'll have very vague, samey descriptions which could be applied to just about anything out there, because they're literally copy pasting. Some of these companies, some of these employees are doing that across large numbers of products that they sell or distribute. You want to know to look out for that.
Absolutely, good.
It happens all the time.
Good tips for people when you're evaluating these. Don't just go with the aggregate rating. Read into them a little. Before we get to our last discussion story, I do want to tell you we will send you a free version of this show if you give us a 5-star rating on iTunes.
Oh, that's an amazing
All you have
deal.
to do is subscribe to the feed.
And do disclose that we're giving you that deal. Finally, Crackberry had an interview with Thorsten Heinz, who is out there trying to go, well, wait a minute. When I said no drastic change, that I didn't mean that I'm not going to do anything different. I mean, listen to me, folks. We actually have a clip that Crackberry put up on their page.
I was talking about drastic or seismic changes, if I recall, right? And what I was trying to address, Kevin, was that there was some suggestion that RIM should be split up or should be even be sold. And my true belief is that RIM has the strength and has the assets that we can really succeed in this market. So this is what I was referring to when people said, is that drastic change.
So I think what the new CEO is trying to say is, look, when I said drastic change, I'm talking about crazy stuff like, getting really drunk on an airplane and refusing to sit in your seat, and lying on the floor, and
not crazy stuff like HP stuff, like splitting the company in half.
Yeah.
So he's just like, well, maybe we'll
He said what I wanted to make clear to the market is that we believe in our own strength. We are BlackBerry. We are an integrated solution, hardware, software, services, and network. He kind of bags on Android in the interview. He says, just take a look where the Android OEMs are. There is just no room for differentiation because they are all the same. He's basically saying we're not going to move to Android. So he's saying, look, when I say no drastic change, I mean we're not going to split up the company or sell ourselves. But he doesn't, in this interview, make any indication that he's going to do anything different. It seems like he's still going to stay the course that Lazaridis and Balsley have plotted out. Sean, do you see anything different?
No, I mean, that's been the consensus around the offices since the day we saw him take office. I mean, we're not hearing any concrete plans, and maybe this just isn't the time to issue any concrete plans, but we can't really tell what he's about yet.
Well, I mean, he's had the job for, 5 days now?
It was Sunday.
Exactly. What has he been doing? It's been 5 days. Why haven't you saved the company
in
yet?
internet time, that's an eternity. But the thing is, now we've seen what the old guys would do. They were like, we have this playbook. It's coming out. It's amazing. And guess what? It was delayed and delayed and delayed. When is it coming out? When is BBX coming, or BB10 coming to your phones? Oh, it's coming in September. Well, maybe he's actually learned that, okay, if I start shooting my mouth off, there's going to be some expectations. And I'm not going to set that up. What I'm going to do is be quiet for a week and say I'm not splitting up the company.
All I'm doing, communicating with the media completely.
You saw how
no news is good
his
news.
mouth off about nothing in particular. It's the difference. He's not. He's just out there. I've got this bold strategy, and I can't tell you what it is.
It's a BlackBerry bold strategy. Thank you very much. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to the news views. The Daily reports that it has eyeballed prototypes of Asus laptops running Windows 8 that ditched the webcam in favor of a Kinect sensor fitted to the top bezel of the display with LEDs lining the bottom of the display. A Microsoft source told the Daily that the devices were official prototypes. Microsoft will release Kinect for Windows February 1st.
Samsung is healthy. Yes, Samsung announced a very healthy fourth quarter financials with a profit of $4.7 billion, which is up 16% compared to last year. Revenue for the quarter was up $42 billion, up 13%. Samsung no longer states how many smartphones it sells, but did say that shipments of smartphones were up 30% compared to the previous quarter. Estimates from analysts say that means probably about 36 million units. They're strong, they've been eating their spinach.
Hey, do you need a new job? Because one just opened up. The first U.S. government CTO, Anish Chopra, has announced he's stepping down. Chopra has worked on engaging U.S. citizens to use technology and received bipartisan admiration. The Republican House Majority Leader and Representative for Virginia, Eric Cantor, paid tribute to Chopra and wished him well in a tweet. The Washington Post reports Chopra may run for office in Virginia.
Andrei Sabelnikov, the Russian security researcher accused by Microsoft of being behind the Kelahus botnet, is very sad. Sabelnikov said he's surprised and shocked at the accusations and insisted on his blog post that he is absolutely not guilty and plans to prove his innocence in court. Richard Boscovich, Microsoft's senior attorney for the company's digital crime unit, said, "We look forward to seeing Mr. Sabelnikov in court so we can continue the discussion."
You know, I'm not saying that Andre is right or wrong because
sure.
I wasn't there. I have no idea. But if he really has been falsely accused, wouldn't that just suck? Excuse me, I did not do this. And Microsoft's like, there he is. That's the guy.
I'm shocked. No, really, I'm shocked. I didn't do it.
I didn't do it, I swear. I'm just a security expert. The Wall Street Journal reports that Facebook could file for its IPO as early as next week, according to the omniscient people familiar with the matter. Those people know so much, don't they? Facebook would be valued somewhere between $75 billion and $100 billion. The company is also looking to friend Morgan Stanley as its lead underwriter. See what I did there? Yeah, it was bad. I'm sorry. Facebook and Morgan Stanley aren't saying anything official about this rumor.
Facebook is also, and Washington State are suing Ascend Media over clickjacking and spreading spam through deceptive tactics. Facebook said the clickjacking was accomplished by making the like button invisible, then tricking people to click images overlaid on the invisible button. This led to links appearing on Facebook walls and Ascend Media making up to $1.2 million a month.
Now, we told you yesterday, Strategy Analytics released data saying that Android tablets make up 39% of the tablet market, taking a little share from Apple iPad. Laptop Magazine asked the study's author, Peter King, what percentage of that 39% are Kindle Fires and Nook tablets? Because those are a little different than Samsung Galaxy Tabs and Motorola Zooms. King clarified that about 40% of the 39%, that means about 15%, of the entire tablet market are Nooks and Fires.
It's a lot.
It's a lot of fire in the Nook.
Mm-hmm. Nook and Fire. Anyway, Pocket Now got its hands on the new version of HTC's Android Skin Sense UI for ice cream sandwich. Where's my ice cream sandwich?
They're on back order.
The skin will support landscape mode, Dropbox integration, support for HTC's Beats Audio, and a new mail app. HTC also decided to stick to capacitive buttons instead of on-screen ones like the Galaxy Nexus. The company also added in a three-dimensional task switcher, which Pocket Now found cumbersome.
Well, at least that means it's bloated and unnecessary. Good for you, HTC. The Pirate Party of Catalonia is taking on the FBI in a Spanish court, claiming legitimate users are owed damages over the closure of Mega Upload. The group says that the FBI, quote, impeded the access to millions of archives of both private individuals and organizations, potentially causing huge personal, economic, and image damages. And also that the investigation may have violated privacy rights. The Pirate Party and the EFF are sharing the contact information of U.S. residents who can join the campaign. If you listen to the DOJ, they said, look at the TOS. You're not going to get anything.
Too many
You're
acronyms.
SOL.
Let's move on to the randomizer.
Randomizer.
I meant to mention this yesterday, and it's too good to pass up today. Kim.com, although he is still in jail on allegations regarding Mega Upload's piracy implications and extradition in the United States, still had a huge inflatable tank delivered to his house.
No, he had a tank in front of his house. It was inflatable.
Well, yeah, this is one of those things that the military normally uses to inflate numbers. I mean, I didn't want to use inflate there. There was an accident. But when there are satellite images of your base, you put up these fakes. So people think, wow, you got some serious firepower.
Really?
Why on earth .com decided to order one? I'm not sure.
Wait a second. The military's everywhere, have like inflatable tanks around, so that when you get like an aerial view.
There's no real tanks, Sarah. They're all inflatable.
I thought that they were real.
Sean, can you explain why this shows up after the guy's in jail? Because when I first saw this, I thought, oh, the military, when they went, the police, I guess, when they went put a tank, I'm like, that seems a little, over the top to try to scare him by putting an inflatable tank. But it turns out, no, it wasn't the police.
It was his.
This was delivered to his house after he was gone.
All I could say is that Kim.com sounds like a very interesting person and has a lot of curiosities that I'm sure they'll be spending a lot of time playing with while they detain him.
I think you're right.
That is a fun pool party.
He doesn't always drink beer.
Inflatable tank.
He prefers those.
Or he's been setting up the best insanity defense for the longest time.
It's a long con.
Tanks made out of air, man. I'm crazy. You can't put me in jail. I wouldn't survive.
I'm crazy. Let's check the calendar.
All Things D's newest conference, D Dive into Media, takes place next week, January 30th and 31st. Big speaker names, executives from Warner Music, Twitter, ESPN, Martha Stewart, even Neil Young himself, the singer.
Neil Young
songwriter.
from Neil Young and Crazy Horse.
Right. And President Obama's Google Plus Hangout also takes place next Monday. He'll be answering questions submitted to the White House's YouTube account about his State of the Union address earlier this week, and chatting with live with chosen guests who are allowed to join the Hangout. Would-be participants still have until tomorrow, the 28th, to submit.
Hey, is something incoming?
Incoming message.
Oh, it's a message. Oh. It's a message actually from Brian about the Facebook timeline. Brian? Take it away, Brian.
Hello, this is Brian from Minnesota. Just reacting to the Facebook timeline. I'm a good Facebook user, log in every 3 to 4 months or so, and I have gotten used to, whenever I log into Facebook, having to relearn how it looks and how it works. I'm not going to flip out, nor will my wife or most of my friends. We all use it about the same amount because we're just used to it always changing on us and not knowing what's going on. All right. Thanks for the show. Bye.
Well, at least he's kind of zen about it. Facebook changes. I never know what's going on.
Change is constant.
I identify with him. I have a Windows machine that I use as a media center PC, and I don't turn it on all that often. Every time I turn it on, I have to not only go through Windows updates, but every single piece of software that I use has to update, except for Chrome, because Chrome always updates silently in the background. Why can't everything be like Chrome in that respect?
I think you just don't use Windows enough.
Wait a minute. Facebook is updating in the background. That's what people are annoyed by. They're like, well, you changed it.
No. I'm not talking about Facebook anymore. I'm talking about every other application. I'm talking about my Windows machine. I'm saying
that intrusive. Remember?
Yeah.
It's an old way of thinking.
Well, I think you should go with Brian and just be like, hey, it happens. This Windows machine will not be as I left it.
It's why I don't use it more often, because I'm like, if I turn that on, it's going to be like 20 minutes of software updates. Yeah.
Well, at least it's not like PlayStation Portable, where you have to update it and recharge the battery after you've been leaving it.
Good point. Email from someone who doesn't want us to use their name on the air says, a few episodes ago, you discussed a woman who was fighting in court to keep from unencrypting her hard drive for the government. I used to investigate criminals with child pornography on their computers. Our biggest fear is that we would confiscate a drive from someone who used TrueCrypt. With TrueCrypt, you can use a hidden partition with your very critical data on it and still unencrypt the drive, but only unlock the outside container. This way you could give out the key, but it would unlock an empty chest, even if there was illegal files in the hidden content. It's a good reminder. TrueCrypt does have that hidden volume. So if you are worried about someone at a border crossing forcing you to give the password, if you use TrueCrypt, you can give a password, and then they'll unlock essentially an empty operating system. Works best with Windows. I did a video for CNET on how to do it.
Yeah. Just don't put anything bad in there.
Well, no, this is for your own personal protection, not for breaking laws.
Well, people who watch your show don't break laws.
No.
Come on, you guys are awesome. Well, that guy's a little borderline. Rob Maxwell wrote in from Damascus, Maryland, says, Tom talked about how the rumored no-used games feature, rumored for the new Xbox 720, that's what it's really going to be called, is anti-consumer, and I'd agree, but then Tom went on to decry the inclusion of a Blu-ray drive. I don't know if you decried it, but you were questioning it, asking instead for a 3-terabyte drive in there and just download all the games, or something like that. To be clear, there's no aftermarket for downloadable content that's legal anyway. Please try to reconcile these two thoughts. I'm not picking on you, but I think they're meaningful trade-offs that should be considered. Thanks. Love the show.
Reconcile.
I don't think there's any reconciliation to be had. When I buy something downloadable, I know that it's not going to be available for me to sell used later. I take that into account right off the top. When I buy a Blu-ray object, I have the right of first sale under the law to go resell that. And so when Microsoft goes and tries to prevent me from exercising that right, that's anti-consumer. When the nature of the item that I'm using is that it can't be resold because it's infinitely copyable, that's just the nature of that thing. I don't see any problem between those two viewpoints at all. I do see a problem with preventing Blu-rays from being sold used. Go ahead, Sean.
Which do you prefer? Would you prefer to have Blu-rays that you can freely resell, or would you prefer to have the 3 terabyte drive?
I would prefer to have the 3 terabyte drive because I find downloadable content easier to deal with, and the amount you get back from selling used Blu-rays is not enough to persuade me different. The problem is that games are too big for that to really work the way I'm making it work in my mind. So if I got a big 50 gigabyte game, I'm gonna want a Blu-ray in all practicality. So essentially, I want both. Or faster bandwidth.
With no caps.
I'll go with that.
And no caps, yeah.
Last email from Radu. Hey, TNT crew, after hearing Tom on episode 423 saying it would be a good idea for carriers to compensate users that would like to extend their contract without buying a device, I've sent an email to my carrier and asked for this type of deal. Since my contract is up on February 14th and I have 2 unlocked smartphones, to my surprise, they responded with a 30% increase in minutes and added some data and €4 off of my current contract per month. Thanks.
That's a pretty fantastic story.
Just ask.
I'm sad that it's only from Europe. I just don't see a United States company acting the same way.
The cable companies and the retention teams,
That's
like,
true.
give me a better
That's a
deal if I'm about to leave. I wonder if people could try that with their phones.
All right.
Well, just see, when I hear something like this, I go, okay, well, yeah, if it was in the U.S. and you told me the story, then I'd call and say, Tom got it, I demand it. And then they'd have to just change their terms for everybody.
Well, anybody who's in Europe should say, Radu got it.
Yeah, you should do that. I hope you do. Get more minutes.
All right, that's it for this show. Thanks, everybody, for listening or watching, and thanks, everybody, in our subreddit, technewstoday.reddit.com. That's the place to go to submit stories for consideration on the show. We look at that all the time to figure out what we should include in our rundown, so keep them coming there, technewstoday.reddit.com. Sean Hollister, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate you being with us. Let folks know about what you're up to at The Verge and where they can find your work.
Just head to www.theverge.com, and you'll see everything I write and lots of my colleagues plugging away at Tech News Stories. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You can find us on the web, twit.tv/TNT. You can email us, tnt@twit.tv. And you can give us a call and leave us a message. Our phone number is 260-TNT-SHOW. I'm off all next week, but Sarah and Iyaz will be here with some special guests. So please come back and join us on Monday. We'll see you then.